Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Combat Zone. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and this is the place where the enemy only has one of four things to say. Bail out, take cover, abandon ship, and we surrender.
All right, so we have quite a show lined up for you as always. Lots of interesting topics. I'm just sitting here wondering which one we want to start with first. Okay, everybody's been poking fun at Donald Trump for saying he bought 1,000 hamburgers for this football team that won one of the bowl games down in the States. I can't remember the Sugar Bowl, Rose Bowl. I don't keep track of college football too much, so I don't know which championship it was, but they won it, and they earned a right to go and visit the president in the White House, which in and of itself is a huge honor because so many people never get invited to the White House. Now, because of the shutdown in the United States, the government's partially shut down there. There was a real decline in the number of staff at the White House. And normally when they have something like this, because the winner of the Super Bowl gets a visit, Major League Baseball, basketball, and hockey, all your five major sports, they all get a chance to go to the White House and be treated to some time with the president, whoever that president happens to be. And there's usually quite the spread laid on. But because of the shutdown, Donald Trump decided, I'm not going to let these guys starve because there were no cooks in the White House kitchen. So he pulled out his own credit card and went out and bought all kinds of food, fast food, Wendy's. I don't want to mention them all, try to mention them all, but all the local fast food, McDonald's, franchises like that, and had this buffet of fast food. And the team loved it. And people are saying, well, he said he bought 1,000, he only bought 300. You know what? Who cares? The reason I bring this up isn't because I want to go counting patties. It's because, think of this, the shutdown, okay? The president found a way to get around an inconvenience caused by the shutdown. Now, I understand that there are a lot of people out there who are suffering because they work for the government and at the moment they're furloughed, they're not getting a paycheck. I get that part. But what I am saying is that the sky didn't fall, the world didn't stop turning, and the sun will come up tomorrow. And yet, there's 800,000 people who aren't getting paid by the U.S. government. So the question becomes, how badly do we really need them in the first place?
Well, there's a lot of people that are actually that are not getting paid, that are working without pay, that are actually important. People like that provide, I understand, security services, TSA at the airports,
okay.
etc. So,
yep.
But you're making a good point, Nick. When you think about the number of people that are actually not getting paid and not working, okay, they're not coming in and working for no pay. And you think about the departments that are scaled back or perhaps even shut down altogether, and maybe not whole departments but offices. This all begs, I think, an important question, and that is, how badly do you need these? And I think that's the untold story of at this stage already of this partial U.S. government shutdown, and that is that the vast majority of Americans aren't feeling any kind of negative impact as a consequence of this partial shutdown. And so you have to ask yourself, how badly do you actually need the services that are being provided by those departments that are not providing the services
right now
at this particular point in time?
And that's what I guess I'm driving at. This is a classic case of saying, okay, what this demonstrates is the bloating of government and how, we have way too much government for the number of citizens in a particular country. And you can say that of a lot of countries. This is a classic case of what happens if just a third of the workforce didn't come to work. Like, I have no idea how many people actually draw a paycheck from the U.S. government or from the U.S. taxpayer. And you're right. There are certain categories of people that, you're not going to not pay the military. They're not going to stay home. You're not going to not pay your EMS people, border security for however effective it is. Those kinds of things. There's certain things for safety reasons. People involved in the transportation industry, air traffic controllers and so on, although Ronald Reagan did fire them back in the 1980s. But that didn't last very long, and it was very quickly rectified. It didn't go on like this did. At least I don't remember it going on that long. But the point is that there's a lot of people out there who are simply shuffling paper from one side of the desk to the other that are not required. And they could be more gainfully employed in the private sector. Because anything the government does, other than those few things I mentioned, the private sector could do, and probably a lot more efficiently.
Well, you've actually raised a really interesting point that I haven't thought about, and that is going back to the Reagan firing of the air traffic controllers who had decided to go out on strike illegally.
Right.
And what he did was he went on national television. I remember this. And we'll get into talk in a minute about how important this particular event was, not just domestically, but internationally, Nick. And I'm really so super glad you remembered it and brought it up. For those who don't remember or don't know about this, or too young or weren't around, the air traffic controllers in the United States are federal employees, and they decided to go on strike. But I don't recall the reason why the strike was illegal. It could have to do with the fact that they aren't allowed to strike because they're an essential service. I don't recall the exact circumstances, but they went on strike, and Reagan went on national television. This is very early on in his presidency.
Right.
Went on national television, and he said, look, you guys, it's an illegal strike, and you have two choices. You can report for work within X number of hours, and, we'll just accept, bygones be bygones. If you don't return to work, you're fired. And I remember people predicting, oh, my God, the sky's going to fall in, literally.
Right.
Okay, literally.
There'll be planes falling from the
not
sky.
Literally, yeah, planes are going to fall from the sky,
right.
Of course. I'm committing that terrible offense of awful, right? Even though I'm not an American, but I'm pretending I'm an American who figuratively uses literally. So, no, figuratively, the sky was going to fall in, not literally. But anyway, you're quite right, and it didn't happen. It was a crisis for sure, but they handled it. And the same thing is happening here with the partial shutdown. But one of the important things, corollary benefits to what Reagan did with the air traffic controllers, Nick, was that people on the international scene, particularly in the old Soviet Union, all of a sudden realized that this was a precedent that they had to take seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Like,
that's very true.
This was not empty. This guy did not have empty rhetoric. I mean,
he wasn't Jimmy Carter.
People teased Ronald Reagan, okay, because they figured, well, it's empty rhetoric, and
right. He's just an actor.
He's just an actor. Yeah, he's just an actor, as opposed to just a community organizer with Obama, right? But, yeah, he's just an actor. I used to say, he doesn't really. He's not paying attention at meetings. He falls asleep. There's so many things that they're saying about Donald Trump today that they used to say about Reagan. But the difference between Reagan and Donald Trump, of course, was that Reagan, he took it all good-naturedly, and he didn't really care.
Trump's got a very thin skin.
Whereas Trump fights back. I don't know whether he has a thin skin or not, okay, but he definitely fights back. But, I think I've told this story on the show once before of how they used to make fun of Reagan because he wasn't a very good student. And, they used to make fun and say, well, he was kind of, well, let's not beat around the bush, Nick. He was kind of stupid. And Reagan's response to that was not, well, first of all, there was no tweeting at that time or anything like that. But he wouldn't have done it anyway. He was just too good-natured a guy to do that. But his response was, he said, these guys are right. I wasn't a very good student. I went to university. It wasn't an Ivy League university. And I was more interested in playing football and sports and stuff like that than I was in my students. So I was not a very good student. And then he'd peer off into the distance and go, gee, imagine how far I could have come if I just taken my studies a little more seriously. So great story. But But I'm glad you raised. I'm glad you remembered the air traffic controllers.
While you were
that's
talking,
absolutely true.
I Googled the story, and I'll just share a few nuggets of the story. I'm certainly not going to read it all. It's far too long for that. But this comes from a website called Politico, and the headline is Reagan fires 11,000 striking air traffic controllers August 5th, 1981. So I don't know where you were, but I was busy getting seasick then. On this day in 1981, President Ronald Reagan fired more than 11,000 air traffic controllers who ignored his order to return to work. The sweeping mass firing of federal employees slowed commercial air travel, but it did not cripple the system as the strikes had forecast. Our strikers. 2 days earlier, nearly 13,000 controllers walked off after talks with the Federal Aviation Administration collapsed. As a result, some 7,000 flights across the country were canceled on that day at the peak of summer travel season. And it goes on, it says Reagan branded the strike illegal. He threatened to fire any controller who failed to return to work within 48 hours. Federal judges levied fines of over $1 million per day against the union. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In 1955, Congress made such strikes punishable by fines or a 1-year jail term, a law the Supreme Court upheld in 1971. So he was completely within his rights to do this.
Now, with the law, does that say the law was upheld in 1971?
Yes, by the Supreme Court.
Okay, because that's got to be wrong because Reagan. This occurred in the early.
Yeah,
80s.
I know that, but the law was
maybe
upheld.
The law was.
He used the law in 1981.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. He also imposed a lifetime ban on rehiring the strikers. So if you got fired, you were never coming back as an air traffic controller.
That's pretty interesting, and
that took a lot of guts.
And Reagan had guts, and you know. Sometimes, and maybe the fact that he, I don't want to say he was slower than some people, but you know he didn't over intellectualize things. He was, people still call him the great communicator. He was an actor. His style was just very different. He liked to inspire people. He talked in soaring terms, maybe even what people might call, I don't know if they use the term these days, but corny. He was a little corny.
Yep.
And in a good way. This is not a criticism, by the way. I think I quite liked Ronald Reagan. Now, if I had to decide whether I was a Reaganite or a Thatcherite, okay, I was much closer to Margaret Thatcher in terms of my outlook and sort of political philosophy and what have you than Ronald Reagan.
No, but
Reagan was quite a leader, as was Margaret Thatcher. But yeah, I'm just very glad that you brought it up. Good thinking.
Well, it doesn't happen very often, so I like to pounce on it when it does. But the working relationship between Thatcher and Reagan was very unique. They had a very close. It was I would characterize it pretty much the same as Churchill and FDR.
So you can't hear this, but in the background there's lightning striking.
You're right.
Oh my goodness gracious! I don't know what we've done here, but everything was working so perfectly. But by the way, guys, the sound is working. You guys can all hear the sound. The problem is that we can't. And I'm just not sure why that it is that we can't hear the sound properly. But
well, we'll get
are we even plugged in here, Nick?
Well, that would help.
All the plugs are plugged in. There's something I've done with one of the settings here that I can't hear the background music. But anyway, this has nothing to do with you guys out there. By the way, can I just interrupt, Nick, to remind people that our phone system is working?
Yes.
I hope.
Well, now I'm not so sure.
844-415-2115 is the number to call, toll-free anywhere in North America. The number again, 844-415-2115. Or you can join us in the chat room. We always have a lot of activity in our chat room. Sometimes it takes a little while to get going, but then things heat up. And how do you do that? Well, you're listening on the live player online. So you just click on the chat bubble in the live player. Register if it asks you to register. That's to ensure that you're a real human being and not a online robot or whatever they call those creepy crawler digital interfering little insects that whatever they are, virtual insects.
Web crawlers, aren't they?
Web crawlers or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, just to verify that you're a real human being, doesn't cost you anything, and then you can participate in the chat room live.
That would make that. You know what? I really enjoy that when people get in there, because sometimes they'll branch off in conversations that we had never intended and bring up things that, hey, there's an interesting thought. It's always nice to have that aspect to the show. Okay, now, so the point to get back to what we were talking about that got this whole thing started about Margaret Thatcher and about Ronald Reagan, the idea about making a case for smaller government. What I think that is, as you pointed out, is the untold story in this. And I'm hoping that people not too far in the distance will be able, into the future, will be able to look at this and say, you know what? The earth did keep turning. Maybe we can do more with less government.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I'm not hearing. Not only am I not hearing a lot of talk about this, I'm not hearing any talk about it, and I'm a little surprised and maybe even a little disappointed about that, because I do tune into American talk radio from time to time, and I've done it since this particular issue arose, perhaps a little bit more than normal. So I'm listening to, the regulars, the Rush Limbaugh's, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, and these guys. I'm not listening to them every single day for the whole day, because that would be, 9 hours a day. And I do have things. I do have a life, Nick. I know it surprises our listeners, but I swear I'm not just sitting around going, okay, talk radio. But I haven't heard a single peep about this. So, and perhaps that's because the subject or the topic that's led to this impasse is border security, and that's become such a hot topic in the United States.
It's all people want to talk about.
That's what all people want to talk about. But it would be a shame if they let this pass, because now this partial shutdown in the United States has now gone on for longer than any other partial shutdown has occurred. So it's and again, the sky is not falling in, figuratively or literally, for that matter. So I think that is the underlying lesson. The underlying takeaway from all of this is that in the United States, at least, there's a lot of things that you could probably do without, and that people are doing without now, and it's really not. I won't say that nobody has felt any kind of negative effect as a consequence of this, but I suggest that the overwhelming majority of Americans have not.
You know who I'm surprised hasn't jumped all over this? Is Rand Paul, the libertarian.
Yeah, it's possible.
I'm really surprised. He's coming to Canada for his for a hernia operation.
I heard that. I think somebody mentioned that to me recently.
Because what's the name of that?
Nick?
Yeah, I think I was telling you the name of that clinic in just north of Toronto.
Right, there's the clinic, a hernia clinic.
Yeah, what's it called?
Shouldice Clinic.
The Shouldice Clinic.
Is that where he's going?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a world famous hernia clinic.
I'm a little surprised because there are some pretty good clinics that do hernia operations in the United States.
You know, they were talking about on terrestrial radio yesterday or the day before about this clinic and how if we allowed ourselves to expand the private sector in healthcare some, we could have a lot of world-class clinics. We could have clinics that specialize, because realize something, that until the last 20 years or so, everything was done in the hospital. And some procedures didn't even exist. Like 20 or 30 years ago, nobody got their knees replaced. It was just you were given pain medication and told to live with it. Like my wife just got a knee replaced.
Right. Yeah. Knee replacements now and hip replacements are
that's relatively new.
It's relatively new, and it's become, maybe not ubiquitous, but there's a lot of people like I have friends that I haven't seen for a few weeks, and I'll see them and they'll go, "Oh yeah, I got my knee replaced." I mean, it's become so common.
Yeah,
it's sort of like, "Oh, I got my knee replaced." Oh yeah, and
it's kind of like you used to do when you got your tonsils out
this morning.
And they don't, as far as I know, they don't even do that anymore.
What's that?
Take your tonsils out.
No, they still do that. They still do. Yeah, they still do tonsil operations. But listen, let me tell you guys, okay? If you have to have your tonsils out, have them out when you're a kid.
Oh yeah,
it's a major thing for
an adult.
adults.
Yep.
Now, have you had your tonsils out, Nick?
No, I don't think so.
No, neither did I. I never had my tonsils out.
No, I
I
didn't.
still have my tonsils. High five.
Yeah,
we've
right
got-
on. Now, I don't have my wisdom teeth. They're long gone.
Oh, I have.
Yeah.
I have. Many of my teeth are long gone. Nick.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But there's all kinds of horror stories people could tell you about having their teeth yanked because there wasn't enough room in their jaw for the wisdom teeth.
Right. That's not an unusual thing either.
No.
That was not my problem.
Dr. Lamar was the one who took them out for me when we were living in Southern Ontario in Chatham. And when I went in for the consultation, he said, I can do this for you one of two ways. I can do this with local anesthetic and you wide awake, or I can put a little cup over your nose and give you the happy gas. And I said, oh, please give me the happy gas. He said, okay, no problem. You'll be pretty much out. I said, okay, well, I'll make sure I'm ready to drive home. He said, oh, no. You're not driving anywhere. So my wife laughed at me when I told her, and she drove me home. I don't remember a thing. All I remember is hearing a little crackle out of one jaw, and I was eating solid food the next day.
Right. I didn't have the laughing gas, and I had a local, and in my case, at least in one instance, the local didn't really work very well. So I've had, but I'm not squeamish that way. Try to take away the pain if it's possible. But I'll tell you this: whatever the sharpness of the pain is, it's short lived, and that's the end of it. So, but I'll tell you that I did have one instance, one tooth that was giving me a lot of trouble, and most of my teeth have been lost due to injury over the years. Okay, playing rugby will do that to you, and other things too. So, but I've lost a lot of teeth mostly to injury. But I have had a couple of teeth where I had some problems. And I remember the first time I had a problem with a tooth, one of my back teeth, that required some extensive dental work, and I went in and we were talking, and the dentist said to me, okay, yeah, you have to have you're going to have a root canal. You that tooth needs a root canal. And I was just sort of haphazardly, okay, a root canal, yeah. And so how much is a root canal? And they gave me a price, and it was like somewhere around $1,000, somewhere a little north of $1,000, as I recall. I said, wow, $1,000. And I said, the dentist says, yeah. And I go, so we're both, sitting quietly. And then I go, so how much to have it out? He says, oh, I don't know, $100.
How much pain can you live with for $900?
I said, out with it. Oh, no, you don't want to do that. And I go, oh, yes, I do. and that was it. I have never had. No, I shouldn't say that. I did have one root canal, and it didn't go well.
No,
I ended up that tooth. They did the root canal, and here's the thing. Okay, with a root canal, I did not know this until later on after what happened. I'll tell you happened. But when you do a root canal and they cut not just the nerves, but they basically cut the they cut the blood flow to the tooth, etc.
Yep.
Okay, so you don't really realize it. Okay, you think your tooth is this hard piece of wood, but the truth is your tooth has a blood supply, and it's a living piece of your body. And as a consequence, when they cut the blood supply, it dies and it becomes very brittle. But I didn't know this, and I'm not going to tell you who the dentist was because you would think that they would remind me that you actually, when you have a root canal done, you have to have the tooth capped. What's the tooth has to have a crown put on it.
Okay.
If it doesn't, what'll end up happening is like what happened to me.
It'll shatter.
I was walking one day, chewing on one of those little plastic swizzle sticks you get in a coffee cup,
right?
And the tooth broke right down the middle, split right down the middle, and so I ended up having to have that out. That was my one experience with a root canal, and that
was enough.
So it was. In fairness, it wasn't just the cost when I said okay out with it. It was also the
previous experience.
The previous experience, and I'm going, okay, well, why do I want to go through all of this? So now, having said that, Nick, it's not like I don't have. I do have crowns. I have a number of false teeth, and I wear partial denture. So people think my smile's just this lovely thing, right? But
I've never been accused
It's
of that.
awful, because I can't chew without my dentures. And I'm only 56, so it's not like I've lost all my teeth. I'm an old man.
Well, actually, my dad had all his teeth out by the time he was 40.
Yeah. My mom also. My mom had a problem with her teeth. She had her teeth out. Where were we? We were living in, so 30, it would have been before she was 40.
Yep.
35, 36 years old. I remember when she had her teeth out.
Yeah, so do I.
She used dentures for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
The full dentures.
Yeah,
right?
he had they pulled them all, top, bottom plate, and he put them in a glass beside the bed. You know that old joke about it was so cold in the house?
Well,
my teeth were chattering, so I had to get up and put them back in my mouth?
Well, it's not as bad as that for me, but it's not a joke. I have a glass that I have to put my teeth in at night, And
this is far more information than our listening audience ever wanted to know. But on one hand, it's really kind of interesting. That has nothing to do with smaller government, but it does have something to do.
No, it's okay. It's not smaller government, but it just goes to show you can put up with so many things.
You don't need the government there to hold your hand.
And just put a smile on your face, no pun intended, But you can live with so many things without, nanny state holding your hand.
Well, okay, since you told the root canal story, I'll tell you one quick one.
Okay, here we go.
And it's got nothing to do with teeth. The listener can't see it, but one of my fingertips, I very nearly lost the end of it. I was out splitting wood one day, and it got trapped between the log and the cradle that the log sits in when you split it. And it ripped the fingertip open. So go to the hospital. And it hurt. Your fingers are very sensitive, of course. And I don't have a phobia about needles. I just don't like them. And if I can get away without having to take a needle, I will. If I have to, I'll do that too. But I was in the emergency room, and the doctor was looking at the end of my finger. He says, now, I'm going to have to rinse this out to make sure there's no foreign objects in there. There's no, because you're working with wood, and there's all kinds of foreign matter that could be in there. I need to get in there with a hypodermic syringe and flush it out with saline solution. I said, okay. He said, I can do this. I can give you a shot on either side of your finger. It's the ring finger on my right hand. And he said, it'll take about 45 minutes for that to freeze. I said, in 5 minutes, you'll be done. Just get in there and rinse it out. He said, are you sure? I said, yes. And it's one of the most painful things I ever went through. But it was over in 5 minutes. I wasn't waiting around for 45 minutes for my finger to freeze and take 2 more needles I didn't need. That hurt a lot. And I'm a big wussy, I'll tell you what. All right. We'll come back here with some meaty, some real content, rather than just personal medical histories. Okay, we're back. Here we are, rebooted, respurred, ready to go.
Okay, we're
all right.
Back.
Now, we were having a little fun in the first half hour talking. It started out talking what I thought was going to be a very serious and in-depth conversation about how this government shutdown in the U.S. is demonstrating the need for a lot less government because the sky didn't fall and the earth didn't stop turning because a bunch of people who were working for the government shuffling papers left to right aren't working right now. And we went on to talk about how there's certain groups within the government that you would never not fund, like the military, EMS,
this is like the
controllers.
Recap, right?
It's a quick recap of the first half hour. Yeah.
Half an hour ago, or on last half hour segment of the program.
There you go.
This is what Nick and Joe talked about.
That's right. And then we got into a little bit of personal information considering our medical histories when we started talking about how...
Okay, let's not exaggerate. It was our dental history. So
yeah, well, that's medical.
Okay, all right.
Why are eyes and teeth not included in our healthcare system?
Oh, Nick, don't ask that question.
I've always been curious.
There's no need for it.
Well,
Because people, there's no need for it. People are not clamoring for it, except for those socialist weirdos. Okay, that's no.
Those four guys in Burnaby?
Please do not take away my private eye care and tooth care.
I'm not trying to take it away, but
Don't
what
give people
I can't
any
figure out,
suggestions.
it's no. Hang on a second. This isn't. Let's take it out of the healthcare field, socialized medicine field. Why are people like optometrists and dentists looked at differently than, say, an orthopedic surgeon?
I don't know.
Neither do I.
I really don't know.
But they certainly are.
They are, and guess what? People still get their teeth fixed.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying they
get their
don't. I
eyes
just can
examined,
never
and if they
understand
need
why the
glasses, they
separation.
get glasses, and people have their own private insurance. Look, it's you're tempting me. Okay, you're baiting me. Again,
When I do that,
no. Our healthcare, our so-called socialist healthcare system, which it is, okay.
yes,
used to be, not so very long ago, a real health insurance system. And you can debate whether it's proper for the government to run it or for the private sector to run this insurance program. But irrespective of who's running it, that's what it used to be. Just like you have insurance, you can either pay out of your pocket for your dentist, or, well, you're going to pay out of your pocket one way or the other.
That's right.
But you could pay through an insurance program for eye care and for dental care, and that's the way it was for your health care, everything else.
Right.
And if I wasn't part of the OHIP in Ontario Health Insurance Plan, if I wasn't part of OHIP as a resident of Ontario, I not only could I pay doctors out of my own pocket, I had to pay the doctors out of my own pocket. Now, everybody joined OHIP, and then the government ran it, okay? And that itself was a debate as to whether or not you should have government-run healthcare insurance. But it was government-run healthcare insurance, not government-run healthcare. And the way it worked was you paid your premium every 3 months. And there were two levels of premiums, Nick. There was the personal, individual premium level,
right,
and then there was the family premium level. And that was it. And guess what? If you didn't pay your premiums and you went to see the doctor, you were out of luck. And I remember once my premium lapsing because I had forgotten to pay the premium, okay? And I went to the doctor, and the doctor submitted the claim to OHIP, and it came back, and OHIP said, well, no, they're not covered. And so the doctor sent me the bill, and I had to pay the bill out of my pocket. Okay? Now, and I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying that it was only later on under David Peterson, I think, who was the premier of the Liberal... there's a surprise, the Liberal premier of Ontario.
No kidding.
I'm pretty sure it was David Peterson. I don't think it was... I don't think it was the NDP government.
Oh, Bob Rae.
Bob Rae's government. I'm pretty sure it was David Peterson's government. And if anyone else there knows, I stand to be corrected. It was one or the other, and they decided to do away with the premiums and turn it into a regular government program where you paid taxes into general revenue. And it wasn't personal taxes, pardon me, it was corporate tax. So they instituted a 2% EHT, the Employment Health Tax. And so employers now had to pay this extra. It was a payroll tax. And to the best of my knowledge, it still is.
Right.
A payroll tax. Although if you earn a certain amount of money above a threshold, my understanding is that you pay an extra amount but I don't earn that kind of money, so I don't pay that extra amount. But the point is, it worked as an insurance program. And for reasons that are beyond me, they decided to get rid of the insurance program and make it a general revenue thing, and get rid of paying premiums and have employers pay a health tax. And that just removed any connection between the consumers, the patients who are consumers of healthcare as a product, when you get right down to it,
right?
And the delivery and consumption of healthcare services, and and this is a good way to sort of segue into one of the topics that we wanted to talk about, and I don't think we put it up on on the website, Nick. But the whole question of governments doing things that just aren't necessary. There was no need for the government to do this in Ontario with respect to healthcare. And you and I, Nick, were talking about this yesterday quite extensively about things in our life, big programs that the government has come up with, ideas. Okay, let's come up with a new idea, and this would qualify as one of those ideas. In fact, we should use it. Perhaps it's not a bad idea to use it in that project we were talking about.
No, maybe not a bad idea at all.
But where was I going with this? What was
the best
metric,
example?
Metric.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going to go to, because I have always hated the metric system.
Well, you see, you and I are different that way. Okay, I don't hate either system. In terms of simplicity, the metric system is simpler because it's all done in divisions of 10.
10, of course.
Okay, so it's easier to. I mean, look, how many meters are there in a kilometer? 1,000. How many centimeters are there in a meter? 100. Okay? It's all divided by 10. How many inches in a foot?
12.
How many feet in a yard?
3.
How many yards in a mile?
So 1,720.
Okay. How many yards in a rod?
60.
Wrong.
90?
5.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm thinking of
how many yards? How many yards in a fathom? Come on, Nick.
3.
I
2.
honestly don't know.
Because it's 6 feet. A fathom is 6 feet.
I see. There.
But you didn't ask me the question I thought you were going to ask me.
How many feet in a mile?
Yes, 5,280.
You'd have to do the math.
No, I can tell you right now. That's what it is.
Okay, but you see, those are numbers that you. And by the way, I knew all of those numbers. Okay,
I figured you would.
I didn't know off the top of my head the feet, but it was easy to figure out. You multiply 1,720 by 3, right?
That's how you get there.
Okay, but it's not intuitive. So in other words, there's no way. I would have to know 1,720 yards in a mile. I'd have to know that. I'd have to memorize that. I don't have to memorize how many meters.
But you memorize it at an age when memorization is easy.
Okay, again, I'm not saying that the imperial system is bad. I'm just saying that the metric system is easier to learn, and especially if you're learning it as an adult, because it's all intuitive. Now, but that's not a reason. Let's get this straight, okay? That's not a reason to tell people that they have to use the metric system. And that's my objection. My objection to metrification in Canada was that there was no good reason. Now,
Precisely.
The justification was that we're trying to make our international trade, our exports more less complicated and more appealing for international markets. But of course, at that time, just like now, but even more so, our biggest trading partner was the United States, and the United States still is not metric, and they're not going to become metric.
No, they're very happy with what they have, and there's no need to change it.
So the argument didn't apply, and even if it made sense, to the degree that we could use the metric system, that exporters could make their products more appealing to the export market by using the metric system, there was never any barrier to them using it for their international trade, for export, for the export market. So the whole thing was just so nonsensical, so pointless. And even to this day, as you pointed out when we were talking about this, Nick, they started the process of metrification in 1971. And it took about 10 years to complete the whole process, at least in terms of law and official practice. But even today, almost 50 years later, even today, people who grew up in the metric system still talk about how their height and their weight in terms of feet and inches for height and pounds for weight.
And the same thing when you buy a car. If you don't buy kilowatts, or joules, you buy horsepower. When you put tires on your car, you don't buy millimeters, you buy, it's actually a blended system. The tire is 17 inches high, and the 235 on the side is the number of millimeters across. It's a blend of the two systems. And what we have now, and I'll tell you what, this is an old rant of mine, this is part of what makes me just go nuts about it, is we've got the worst of both systems. It really is a disaster. It would have been far better for the government to come out and say, Tuesday, January 1st, 1971 or 72, the country will be metric. And it will be against the law to use the imperial system, and just cut it off at the knees.
But to a degree, to a certain extent, that's what they did.
But they didn't make a clean cut.
Well, how do you mean by a clean cut?
They didn't say, that's it. From now on, we are a metric country.
Yeah, they did. That's
you are
the
not
point.
going to be allowed to use feet and inches. Well, in the construction industry, in the auto industry.
So here's the problem. The problem, of course, is, but how can you, this is, again, illustrating the problem, right?
See, the government...
Is that it's, in terms of international trade, okay, our biggest trading partner is the United States.
Yeah, I know.
So if I buy pipe, if I buy steel pipe, this is a beautiful example. First of all, you go to the if you go to your local lumber yard or Home Depot or whatever, you pick up, what do you pick up? You pick up 2x4s. Why do they call it a 2x4?
Because it's 2 inches by 4 inches, by 8 feet or 12 feet or 14 or 16.
Okay, but actually, it's actually not.
1 3/4 by 3 3/4. I know,
which is a different subject altogether.
Right.
Okay, but 2x4. It's a 2x4. 2x4. A 2x6, a 2x8, 2x12, whatever.
2 by whatever.
Okay, so when you buy plywood, okay,
4 by 8,
half-inch plywood.
Yep. And it's in a 4 by 8 sheet, different thicknesses. Okay,
so now, this is an interesting story, okay? For steel pipe sizes, all right, because I used to do this, for work. We used to use steel fittings for gas fittings and for water and plumbing and stuff like that, right? So you actually buy those. Used to be, you'd buy a steel fitting or a galvanized steel fitting, let's say 12 inches by 1 inch, okay? So 12 inches long, inside diameter 1 inch, right?
Right.
Well, you're not allowed to do that anymore. They're not allowed to sell 1 inch pipe. This is going back years and years and years, okay? But of course, where does the pipe come from? Well, most of the pipe comes from the United States, okay? So we stopped producing steel pipe in Canada quite some time ago. Yeah, the Americans aren't going to change it. So what do? We went from 1 inch in diameter to NPS 1, which stands for nominal pipe size 1. Not a word. I'm not exaggerating.
I know, that's what I'm laughing at.
It's like, I think sometimes, the good Lord has played a trick on me, and I went to bed one day and woke up the next day in a Monty Python movie.
This is what this is the Ministry of Silly Walks. For those of you familiar with Monty Python skits, that's what this is. And again, now we're getting a little off track here because it's about programs in general, not metric and versus imperial. First of all, I was comfortable. They didn't with the metrics with the imperial system. I am still comfortable with it. I will not use metric unless I absolutely have no choice. I go down the highway and I convert all the signs in my head by multiplying them by 0.6. So if it's 300 clicks, I know it's 180 miles.
Ballpark.
Yeah, right. Well, if you want to get right down to it, it'd be 0.62. But I don't need to be that accurate. Metric makes sense in the laboratory. And they've always used metric in the laboratory. I don't have a problem with that. But most of us don't work in a laboratory. So my kids today, they will say, but it's so much easier. And my dad used to say, easy is the lazy man's way.
I don't care. Yeah, look, I have no problem with people being lazy. Okay, fine. If you find an easy way to do it,
he certainly did.
That's not the problem. The problem is that it doesn't matter whether it is easier or not. Okay, you don't tell a person all of a sudden, you've been buying your gasoline, filling your car up with gas in gallons for your entire life, and all of a sudden you go to the gas station and it's illegal for them to sell you gas using gallons. Okay, so I go, back in the days when you used to actually have an attendant come out and fill up your car, Okay? So you pull up to the pump, roll down your window, go, fill her up. Okay? And the guy'd fill it up.
Yep.
And then the next day I show up and it's no longer legal. It's illegal to sell me gas in gallons. It's got to be in liters, okay? So I'd roll down the window, and what did you think I said to the guy?
Give me 10 gallons.
Fill her up.
Oh, that's just,
it didn't matter. It was like telling somebody that they can't speak the language they've grown up with. And it's very much that. It's very much that. The amount of gasoline that my gas tank held didn't change.
Yeah.
Only the terminology changed. So basically what I was being told was, I'm no longer allowed to talk this language. I have to speak this language.
Even though I know this language, but I don't know that one.
It didn't make a difference.
Yeah.
But the law, they changed the law. They made it that I had to do this. And you know, as I think I commented yesterday, right? I mean, who cares? Metric, imperial, or Klingon? It's still the same. It's still the same volume. You're not changing anything except for what I'm allowed to call it.
Now, with that said, though, because we could go on, I could go on for hours.
We could spend the whole night on this because we have multiple examples of this kind of stupid.
Well, let's tackle one more. Okay. I'm just trying to think of some of the other ones we were talking about.
Well, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Yes, okay, that's...
It's shocking. It's shocking to young people today when they learn that you and I, Nick, grew up, when we were growing up, Canada was a free country.
Actually, it was more free then than it is now.
You can very much make that argument. The Charter, freedom of speech... Well, guess what? We had freedom of speech. We had better freedom of speech, actually, when we were growing up.
Well, look at
freedom
firearms
of religion,
as an example.
Right to private property. All of these things, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms did nothing, didn't add a single right to what we already enjoyed that was either entrenched in legislation or was just the common practice in the common law, which made it already constitutional. Now, you could get into legal sort of splitting hairs and arguing about, whether or not the courts should have had ultimate jurisdiction or not. But that was the real only true innovation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All of the rights that are in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms existed, and we enjoyed completely before the Charter was adopted in 1982.
Well, if you think about it and start looking at some of the examples of the kinds of freedoms we had then that we don't have now. When I was growing up on the farm down near Windsor, I had a single-shot .22. My dad gave it to me for Christmas one year. And he didn't have to go and register it. He didn't have to take a firearm safety course. He told me, if I ever catch you using this thing unsafely or pointing it at anybody, I will kick your butt up between your shoulder blades and then use the rifle to pick your teeth with. You'll never get it back again. That was good. That was all the rifle training I needed, man. And then, when I went into Air Cadets and so on, they taught us they taught us properly how to safely handle a firearm. But I would go down it took about a mile, and I remember the place called Joe's Store. And an old guy by the name of Joe Rive ran the store down there for years in a little town I lived near called Staples. And I would go and buy 50 rounds of .22 caliber ammunition at about 12 years old, walk in, I'd plunk down my $1.99 or whatever the price was. I forget what it is, maybe $1.29. Who knows? This goes back a long time. But I would pick up, and he'd say, I got to do some shooting today, eh? And I said, yep. And I'd pick the box up, I'd drop it in my pocket, and I'd walk home. And I'd go outside, and I would set up targets, and I would shoot them all. And just it never crossed anybody's mind that I might do something nefarious with it. Or that, oh my God, it's not safe. Because there was enough impetus for me to be safe, like the threat of my father killing me was enough to make sure that I didn't misbehave. And everybody else around me had the same kind of thing. Now, that was in an agrarian setting. But even in the city, even in town, in Leamington, where I went to high school, we had a range on the school property, and they taught rifle safety there. It's just, so that's just one example. There was all kinds of it. We used to go to town in the back of the pickup truck. You'd have mom and pop in the front and 6 kids in the back. And you counted heads when you got where you were going to make sure you still had 6 kids. And if you didn't, you went back and found the one that bounced out. Just a completely more open and free society than what we have today. Because that you get caught now. Imagine what would happen to you if you grabbed a half-ton pickup, put 6 kids in the back, mom and pop in it, and drove to the store in town. You'd be in jail the rest of your life. And they take the kids away because you're an unfit parent. So this is just more examples of the same kind of thing where these policies have gone crazy. We could talk about different colors for emergency vehicles. You and I talked about the OPP yesterday. You know, why are they were black? What were they first started out black and white?
Fire trucks are the better example.
Okay, go ahead.
Because everybody knows about red fire trucks, of course.
Right.
And then somebody came up with the bright idea that it was better to paint the fire trucks yellow. So there was this whole thing about painting fire trucks yellow in Ontario anyway. And I don't know whether it was a provincially mandated thing or whether various municipalities just decided that it was better to paint their fire trucks yellow. But we certainly did that in Ottawa or in Nepean. So the fire trucks for a time were yellow. And then all of a sudden they decided that it was better to have the fire trucks painted red. So they went back to painting them red. And you know what? This may sound like a very small thing, but it's actually expensive to paint a fire truck.
Yes, okay? It is.
It's not cheap to paint a fire truck. But the more important thing, it's not a dollar and cents thing, okay? The more important question is, did anybody who decided that it was better to paint the fire trucks yellow have to answer to anybody when a year or 2 years later, quite possibly the same person, decided that the proper color for fire trucks was not yellow but red? Okay, and you think, my brain is going to explode.
Well, the body shops loved it.
Okay, I mean, am I the only person, like every 5 years we come up with a new way of teaching math?
Yeah, that's a good example.
Has anybody actually hit the pause button and asked what I think should be the obvious question, and that is, well, when we were doing it the other way and you made us change, okay, now you're telling us that change was actually a mistake. That when you told us we had to change to this new system, okay, picture this in your mind. Over the course of 15 years, you have System A, System B, and System C. Okay, so at some point in time, you're using System A, and then the experts come and they say, oh, no. The proper way to teach is System B. You have to teach by System B. So they change the textbooks. They have all of your teachers going and taking seminars during their professional development days, because we all know the teachers all attend seminars on professional development days.
That's what professional days are for. Okay, we believe every word of that.
The teachers do not take long weekends.
No.
When the PD day is Monday or Friday. Okay?
Of course not.
No. Okay? No, do not. Nick, do not accuse teachers of doing that, okay? I will stand up for the teachers every single time. Okay.
I'm laughing because I know a few teachers.
Okay, so they go through it. So the teachers are retrained. They're re-educating the teachers so that they teach with the proper way, System B. Oops. Until we come up with System C. Now, System B is the wrong way. System C is the proper way. So now we have to go through all that training. But nobody actually hits the pause button. Nobody actually says, wait a minute.
So that means
So what you're saying is that when we switched from System A to System B, that was a mistake. System B was the wrong way to teach.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be learning System C.
That's right. But the whole justification was that System B was the proper way to teach. And you see this again and again and again in so many areas. Oh, man. So this is what I say. I don't mind change. But there's got to be 3 things, okay? 3 things with change. The first is it's got to be necessary, it's got to be beneficial, and it has to be implemented in a way that respects the tradition or the customary way of doing things.
All right. With that said, we're going to take our top of the hour break. You guys stay right there. When we get back, we've got plenty more on the platter here to choose from, and we'll have
plenty more from what?
On the platter to choose
on the
from.
Platter.
It's a buffet. Remember,
not
the platter, the platter.
Okay, we're going to go for a break, guys. We'll catch you on the other side.
Combat Zone, folks. Second hour straight ahead. We've got some stuff on the table. It's a little more serious. We don't like to take ourselves seriously, but the news, that's different. As you're all aware, we talked about... no, we didn't. You and I discussed it, but we didn't talk about it on the air. And that's the story about Jagmeet Singh being embarrassed right out of his socks because he didn't know about the issue between China and Canada, how the Chinese ambassador wrote that the reason why Canada arrested that official of Huawei was because Canada, white supremacy. It was guilty of white supremacy. And when asked about it...
White privilege?
White privilege. Okay, white privilege is a better... Yeah, that's right. That's actually what he said. So anyway, Jagmeet got caught with figuratively speaking, his pants down on that one. And just he made Trudeau look smart the way that it happened. And you got to work to do that.
Right.
So now all of that...
Jagmeet Singh, just for our people who don't know, because remember, we do have a global audience here.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Okay. So Jagmeet Singh is the leader of Canada's federal New Democratic Party, which is essentially Canada's Socialist Party. And he's the leader, but he's not a member of Parliament yet. He's running in a by-election in a southern British Columbia riding, Burnaby. I don't know the exact date that the by-election is going to be held, but I think it's sometime in early February or middle of February. Anyway, I just wanted to put that in
that's
context.
Fine. Yep. Anyway, so he's vying for a position to be Canada's next leader in the next election, and he doesn't know about one of the hottest stories on the planet, and that's Canada's, I want to say tiff or spat. Those are two words that just don't fit. Situation between themselves, a diplomatic situation between Canada and China. I mean, it's been talked about all over the world, and he didn't know it. So that's just a way of setting the table, because I do want to talk about this.
Yeah, let's talk about it, Nick.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
That story...
Jump right in.
That story...
I don't want to dominate
too
much.
The beginning of your sentence is interrupting the middle of mine.
No, all joking aside, it's a serious topic.
It is. Now... From the Canadian perspective, we arrested the senior vice president or a senior executive of
Huawei.
Right, on the request of the Americans.
Actually, I think isn't she like the daughter of the CEO or the founder or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
She's not just a senior executive, but she's like a family member.
Right. This strikes right at the heart of Huawei. Anyway, we did that because the Americans asked us to. And based on our treaties and our extradition laws, we were compelled by treaty to do that. Well, China got its nose out of joint over that and started to detain our diplomats overseas. And a few days ago, they had a Canadian who was a drug dealer, who they accused of being a drug dealer.
Allegedly.
Alleged is a very good word in this case.
Right.
Because he may be, we don't know.
Right, I don't know. You're right. He's and when you say a drug dealer, I mean, I don't know what I don't even know what he was accused of, to be honest.
Smuggling cocaine to Australia.
How much did he bring in over the border?
Now, there's no way to know for sure.
We don't know.
That's right. But that's what he was convicted of. So whether he's guilty or not now has become a moot point, because they have taken his 15-year sentence and upped it to death. And I'm thinking to myself, and this is my guttural reaction, was that, okay, so Trudeau's made a dog breakfast out of... Trudeau is the prime minister, for those of you who don't know. He's made a dog's breakfast.
Justin Trudeau, not Pierre Trudeau.
Well... you know what? Pierre would have handled this much better than Justin.
Well, Pierre would have been over there like buddy. Pierre loved communist China.
Well, so does his son. Anyway, the point is that my first reaction is, oh, great. We've made a dog's breakfast of all kinds of different international affairs, Saudi Arabia being one, India being another, and now we have China on top of that. He's going to make, not only is he going to make us look like fools again, but a Canadian's going to pay with his life for this. That was my first reaction. And the whole point is that you've got to react in some way. And as you pointed out yesterday when we were discussing this, we don't have a lot of cards to play. It's not like we have the 82nd Airborne we could drop in and pluck this guy out in some daring Hollywood-style rescue. We have JTF-2, but let's face it, if you're going to drop them into a country of 1 billion dedicated communists, you're sentencing them to death. So that's not an option. We don't have the military card to play. We don't have economic cards to play because we need them a lot more than they need us.
Well, we I don't want to say, because we argued about this a little bit yesterday, Nick. And I've given it some thought. And in fairness, we do have economic cards to play. But the problem is that whatever cards we play are going to hurt us as much as it's going to hurt them. And so when it comes to leverage, I don't know how much leverage we have economically.
Well, and I guess, okay, again, I'm not, my whole thing was this visceral reaction. I mean, drug dealing is a very serious crime.
Sure.
And let's assume for a moment that he is guilty.
Unless you're the Canadian government.
Government, yeah. Right? It's like anything else. It's only against the law for the citizens, not for the country, and not for the government. But the point I'm making is that you've got this guy who, for the sake of discussion, will give the Chinese the benefit of the doubt, which is a very dangerous thing to do. They are not a democracy. They're a communist dictatorship that has figured out how to use the free market to enrich themselves and to make themselves even a stronger country in every sense of the word. So this is the kind of monster that we're dealing with. I had a thought and it's gone. What was I talking besides the fact? Where was I going with that?
I don't know, but I'm starting to think. Okay, not only we're gonna drop dentures and go into Alzheimer's. I know, terrible thing to say because this is a serious topic.
All right. I know where I was going. Okay, so the Chinese, I don't trust the Chinese judicial system.
No, of course not.
Thank you.
They don't have the rule of law in China. It's all very arbitrary.
So this guy, but for the sake of this discussion, let's assume that they got it right, that this guy is guilty. They've already passed a sentence on this guy.
I know.
Now they've upped the sentence for political expediency.
Maybe.
It sure looks that way from here.
Yeah, you're maybe right, but the big question is, what do you do about it? And I just don't know that we have many cards to play. We're starting from a weak hand. But I could promise you this, okay? I could guarantee you this, Nick. Okay. As much as we want to pin this on Justin Trudeau, I hate the fact that you from time to time make me defend the Prime Minister, okay? I really do. I resent you for this, Nick, okay? Really. Okay, I thought you were my friend. But look, it's the first thing is, as you rightly pointed out, okay, the arrest of this executive with Huawei was, and I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that right. I never know how to pronounce it right.
Huawei,
Huawei,
yeah, whatever. Don't look at the way it's spelled. It's like my last name. Don't look at the way it's spelled.
Okay, so the allegation is that she was involved in something illegal in the United States. An arrest warrant was issued, and there was a request to detain her in British Columbia, where she was in Vancouver, I believe it was.
Yeah, that's right.
Pending extradition proceedings, okay? So that's the process. So I am quite certain, to start with, I'm quite certain that nobody picked up the phone and called the Prime Minister and said, Prime Minister, what should we do about this? And he shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't...
I'm sorry, the visual was priceless.
Because you had to see the visual of that, because I was just, okay, we're pretending to toke here. It's like Up in Smoke, right? Up in Smoke. How's that song? Okay, no, we're not going to play it, okay? The Prime Minister did not say, I don't care, go do whatever you want to do, okay? I'm sure this never even reached his desk. once the arrest was made, now we have, the thing is that the people have to understand, including the Chinese government, that we do have the rule of law here, and the Prime Minister can't just pick up the phone and say, okay, guys, let her go, okay, whatever. Okay, and even if he could do that, okay, we have to deal with the Americans as well, right? So it becomes very complicated, and it's not an easy thing to wiggle your way out of, because now we've got the two giants fighting between themselves, and we're kind of like the mouse that's going to get stepped on, right?
Right.
All right. So once this happens, okay, what exactly is the Prime Minister supposed to do? Well, he'll pick up the phone. I'm sure he'll talk to the president of China. Now, let's not assume that he's not doing that. I'm sure he's done that. I'm sure he's doing that. I'm sure that the Minister of Foreign Affairs is in contact with the Foreign Affairs Minister in China, and I'm sure that both the Minister and the Prime Minister and other government officials are working the phones, trying to enlist the support of other countries that ought to have more influence with China than we do. So in this respect, I'm prepared to give the Prime Minister a pass. It is frankly inconceivable to me, despite the political differences that I might have with the Prime Minister on a wide range of issues, it's inconceivable to me that our Prime Minister would be so discreditable that he would simply turn a blind eye to the imminent danger that this Canadian citizen is facing in China, and not just this fellow, unfortunate fellow who has recently seen his. What is the opposite of commute? When you commute a sentence, you're going down to a lower level. I don't know what the opposite of commute is, but
we don't do that, so we don't.
And we
really
don't
have
do
a
that
term.
here, obviously. Well, no, that's not true. You can appeal a sentence here and have an
yes, but it's a long, drawn-out process. You don't do it in a one-day trial.
That's true enough. But again, you're talking about China, and I always say this. Okay, good grief! If you're going to go to China, okay, you better toe the line properly. Okay, I don't want to say that I don't know what this person did, but let's not forget that this fellow may well have been trying to smuggle some drugs in, and the reality is that if you're going to be trading drugs on the international market, even if you're using them for your own recreational use and you're crossing borders, there are countries where that carries the death penalty. So if don't take your life in your hands by that.
They call it dope for a reason.
Whether this guy is guilty of it or not, whether he deserves the death penalty or not, is that separate lesson to learn. Okay, don't jeopardize your life by doing stupid things like carrying illicit drugs over borders.
Now, they did. The reason why I'm worried about this is because they have done this before. In 2009, they executed a British national for the same thing, for drug smuggling. So it's not like this is unprecedented. And it's not, back from the Great Leap Forward back in the 1950s. We're talking about within very, very near history. It's only 9 years ago. So it's not even a decade yet. And this is why I just, really at the heart of it, I wish there was somebody else in the Prime Minister's chair. Maybe the results will be completely different or the same. Maybe things are going to play out no matter who's in that chair. But I would have a lot more and I'm not even referring to just to Stephen Harper, okay? Because I don't want to it's ABT, anybody but Trudeau. Because I just have no confidence in his ability to think beyond the end of his own nose. He's such a self-promoter. He's such a somebody who cares about nothing but himself. And to be in the Prime Minister's chair, you have to surrender yourself to this sounds very altruistic, but surrender your own personal situation to the good of the country, to the people who live here. It's his number one job, and I don't think he's up to it. And that's why you find yourself defending it, because I'm making an emotional argument, you're making a logical one. And somewhere between the two is between the two, I think is how this is going to play out. Now, he could do something, and I'm hoping he's done it, and that's get on the phone to talk to Trump about this so-called wonderful relationship he has with the Chinese president. Well, listen, Mr. Trump, if it's that great, Canadians going to die, and we need your help right now. So pick up the phone, call that guy, and tell him to, at the very least, lower his sentence back to what it was. At the very least. You know, if you're not willing to let him go, fine. But at least don't kill him. That he could do. Has he done it? I have no way of knowing. I have no idea.
Well, again, Nick, you're not wrong in a lot of things that you're saying. I guess the only thing that I would do is reiterate that it's inconceivable to me that a Canadian Prime Minister, irrespective of his political outlook or what party he leads, would not do everything in his or her power to bring this person home or to save this person's life. But we just find ourselves in the unfortunate situation where we don't have as much power on the international scene as we like to pretend we do. And this maybe is a bit of a wake-up call to Canadians who I find from time to time, gosh, here's something that's going to get us into some trouble there, Nick. I find that we are a little full of ourselves from time to time, a little naive. We think that we're God's gift to. There was a commercial. I think it was a YouTube commercial, if I recall, a couple of months ago that I took note of. And the gist of it was that not just that the world needs more Canada, but the universe needs more Canada.
Oh, brother!
And so there's a certain hubris that I detect in this country that is entirely undeserved, entirely unearned. Not that hubris is ever really earned, but at least if you're going to think that you have some power, real power in the world. It helps. If you're going to go around acting like you have some power, it would help if you actually had it. What we don't have is we don't have military power to speak of. And while we do have some economic power, we're still Canada. And we may be one of the G7, but one of the G7 doesn't make us the most powerful economic country in the world. And the Chinese have a very strong economy, a very huge market, and there are very strong forces that are interested in pursuing those markets. And, of course, then there's the United States. I mean, they're the big boy on the block. So if you want to be able to have influence in the international stage, then you have to be able to cultivate and exercise power internationally. And I'm not saying that we can't have some of that, but I'm saying that we don't have it right now.
Well, let me ask you a question.
And we don't recognize it, and that's the number one impediment to not acquiring it.
No, fair enough. You don't realize there's a problem. You're not going to work to fix it. But let me ask you this question. We had 2 Canadians beheaded in the Far East. Who was the Prime Minister then? Do you remember?
I don't remember the incident.
Yeah, there were 2 guys pleading on YouTube channel. They were taken by terrorists. Was it in Malaysia?
Or Malaysia probably sounds like a Malaysia thing or an Indonesia thing. Malaysia probably.
In that situation, we could have worked with the Malaysian government and used JTF2 to go in and try and get those guys. It wasn't because you're not dropping them into China, you're dropping them in Malaysia, completely different set of circumstances. However, the point is that Justin Trudeau was the Prime Minister then too. At least I'm 90% sure he was. And those guys died. And this is why I'm looking at the history. And I'm trying not to be too emotional about it because, look, the guy's if he's a drug dealer, okay, but if he is to die for peddling drugs, okay, and I don't have any love for drug dealers, let it be done properly in a court of law that respects the rule of law, not at the hands of a dictatorial government who is simply using his death as punishment for a country that did something they don't like. Because we do respect the rule of law.
Right. And in fairness, gosh, again, you always get me boxed into these corners where I'm almost defending, the people that I despise the most, okay? But in fairness, let's remember that we who are not do not have access to all of the information are really just connecting the dots ourselves, and we don't know with absolute certainty that this is directly related to the arrest of this high-tech executive in Vancouver. It's plausible, maybe even probable, but I don't have all of the information. And, it's drives my wife crazy because, I'm just one of those people that refuses to jump to conclusions. Show me the evidence, show it to me, and then we can say, with absolute certainty. But even then, taking it for granted that there is this connection and this is how we find ourselves in this predicament, or this is how this fellow finds himself in this predicament, the bottom line is that there isn't a whole lot more than we're doing that we can do. And I urge Canadians, and I'm speaking as a partisan conservative, I urge Canadians to reserve their judgment on this and to understand that no Canadian Prime Minister, including Justin Trudeau, a Liberal Prime Minister, no Canadian Prime Minister would not do everything in his power to bring this fellow home or to find a way to mitigate whatever his sentence is or to have his sentence commuted. I don't accept that. And I think that what we're seeing is not a limitation of Justin Trudeau, but a limitation of Canadian power. It's a very real, a very serious problem, something that I think that we ought to be taking seriously. We ought to be taking measures to rectify. We're never going to be as big and as powerful as the United States is militarily, but there are things that we could be doing diplomatically, economically, and yes, militarily to enhance our reputation in the world and to enhance the amount of power that we can wield in situations like this.
I wish I had as much confidence or, that I could share that attitude. Believe me, it pains me to say this. I just don't think it's true in his case. Well,
and just to apply the logic that I've applied right across the board, you could be right. When I say it's inconceivable to me, that doesn't mean that it's not true.
Yeah. They were the two gentlemen. It was in the Philippines. They were beheaded in 2014, so he was the prime minister.
No, Stephen Harper. Justin Trudeau did not become prime minister until the late fall of 2015. Oh. And with that, Nick, unfortunate piece of news to you.
Well, notice why I'm looking it up, because I want to make sure I'm right.
No, I hear you. You'd rather be right. We're going to go for a break. We're going to go for a break. We'll catch you later.
No, it happened in 2015.
Combat zone. I wanted to sound more excited, but this was kind of a mellow intro.
Yeah, it was.
A little less rambunctious, a little less aggressive than those previous ones. And it's funny because I'm the one that chose them, right? So Anyway, yeah, hey, I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you are back in the combat zone. And let's talk a little bit about Brexit, Nick.
Okay, just before we do that.
But before we do that, back to...
I just want to say I was right. They were taken in January of 2015.
Right, under Stephen Harper.
No, 2015.
Yes, I know. Justin Trudeau was elected in October of 2015.
Let's see. No, I was convinced reading the story that this happened on his watch.
Well, part of it might have.
Well, a lot of it did.
Okay, but I'm just saying that it probably straddled the election.
Because the date on the story was December 18, 2018, but that doesn't help us with that.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, look, let's. I mean, you're not wrong. Maybe.
Anyway, okay, you're right.
But
let's
I think
move on.
There's nothing that we're gonna. There's no gain here for us continuing to bash Justin Trudeau for something that may or may not be happening. I just say this, okay? I'm not going to argue the guy's credibility. I'm not going to argue with the guy's character. I'm not defending any of that. I am just saying that, there is the office of Prime Minister, and Justin Trudeau is not the government. He's one part of the government, and even with Justin Trudeau, as I said, it's just inconceivable to me that he's not doing, something about this. And having been in government and outside of government and involved in the government and involved in the political process and public policy and all of these things in different capacities over the last 30 years, Nick, one thing I could tell you, and I know you'll get this, is that that the public doesn't know most of what's going on.
On that we will agree, and on that we will move on.
For better or worse.
Right.
For better or worse.
So we had this story out of England, and just switching gears now, Brexit. And that has been, since when did they first vote to leave? It's been a while now.
Well, 2016, in June of 2016. And it's been, the reason why I want to talk about this is it not so much that it affects Canada, but not that, I mean, it's interesting to somebody like myself who likes to watch what's going on in terms of parliamentary maneuvering and the politics of things and what have you. But this week has been extraordinary. The past month has been extraordinarily historic when it comes to these things, to parliamentary process and procedure. But in particular this week, extraordinary, historic events have been happening in the UK Parliament. And let's go back to, just to set this up, Nick, as you know, the United Kingdom had a referendum in June of 2016 where the people voted to leave the European Union. And if I had been there, I would have supported that. I would have voted to leave as well. We're not going to get into, everything that we laughed about in terms of useless government and pointless regulation and diktat from, faceless, nameless bureaucrats. Everything that we joke about in Canada, multiply it by 10, multiply it by 100, and you've got the European Union. Okay.
Oh, amen to that.
And so, the British have just had enough. And in 2016, they voted to leave the European Union. And then they had a subsequent general election. And the Conservative Party that was in the government at the time, David Cameron was the Prime Minister, who he stepped down after the referendum because he was one of the leaders of the Remain campaign.
Right.
And he felt that he had an obligation to step down. He did this. Theresa May was elected leader of the Conservative Party. She promptly called a general election and the Conservative Party was reelected, but as a minority party. It's a minority government.
Yeah, I still don't understand why she called that election.
And there is a number of people who have been quite critical of her for doing that. Anyway, she did it. But now they're come across. She has had the last 2 and almost 2.5 years to negotiate. Well, it has been 2.5 years.
Yeah.
To actually negotiate the terms of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. Now, the reason that you negotiate the terms is you invoke what's called Article 50 in the European Union Constitution or whatever, which is the clause that begins the process of a country leaving. So countries can leave the European Union. But they want to do it in an orderly fashion, and they want to have, proper trade agreements, etc., in place for when that day comes.
Right.
And so, quite brilliantly, I think the politicians who wanted to make sure that the government follows through properly entrenched the departure date of March 29th in law.
Yeah,
so that's an actual law. It's not just an arbitrary date anymore. So March 29th, 2019, quickly coming up. So throughout the summer and into the fall, as we're getting closer and closer and closer, it became apparent that the deal that Theresa May's government was negotiating was not going to be satisfactory to very many people. And we're not going to get into all of the details, but suffice to say that, suffice to say that Prime Minister May's government did not really deliver on all of the promises and assurances that in the deal that she ultimately negotiated and agreed to with the European Union. So, but now she was obliged to take this deal back to Parliament to get Parliament's approval of it, and
that didn't happen.
Now we have some very real. This is where the rubber is going to meet the road.
You got that right.
So in December, they were supposed to have a vote on this in December, and it was very apparent that the opposition to the deal, the specific terms of the deal, was so great that the government was going to lose the vote. So the very day that they were going to vote on it, the government canceled the vote. They pulled the motion, and the House of Commons in the United Kingdom in London has just been up in arms since then, in quite extraordinary, almost open rebellion, to the point where they've now voted that the Prime Minister has to come back with a different plan. It's very complicated. Anyway, the Prime Minister Theresa May went back to, over the Christmas season, back and forth to her European partners, trying to change some of the terms of the deal, trying to get assurances that some of the less savory points of the deal would not be implemented.
And
oddly enough,
happen.
we write it into the deal, but we're not going to do it. Anyway, so she was compelled still to bring the deal back for a vote in the House of Commons, and they finally did that on Monday. Was it Monday or Tuesday? Sorry, no, it was Tuesday. It was yesterday.
Yeah, that's right.
My apologies on that. Anyway, so they voted on the deal, and the House of Commons, members of the House of Commons, voted against the deal by a margin of 434 to 202.
Yeah, it's 2-1.
Which is approximately 2-1. It's a little more than 2-1. Extraordinary. The biggest defeat in modern history for any government measure in the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. Historic.
Yeah.
I mean, no. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, mark your day, mark your calendar. Go on YouTube. Go to the parliamentary channel in the United Kingdom online and watch the proceedings. It's been quite extraordinary.
It was funny.
So just to finish this, okay? So interestingly enough, the Labour Party immediately says yesterday, after the government lost the vote, the Labour Party is the opposition party,
right,
decided that they were going to move a vote of no confidence to try to bring the government down. And so they had today the debate. And I have to tell you that the quality of the debating is so much higher there than the quality of the debates here. I had forgotten how much better the debating quality is in the United Kingdom than it is here. And this may be boring some people, and this is a little bit of,
it's down in the weeds a little bit.
A little bit. But let me just finish this, okay, to say that they did have a vote of no confidence today, and the government that lost the vote on the Brexit plan that they had come up with by a little more than 2-1 yesterday, won tonight over there, the no confidence vote, 306 to 325. So they find themselves in this incredible position where Parliament has said, no, they're not allowed to do what they want to do, but we still have confidence in you. You're still the government. Fascinating.
It is absolutely
stuff.
bizarre. And you're right about the level of debate. I was watching Theresa May, and I keep wanting to call her Lizzie May, but I was watching her make her appeal for her case. And there are those who said she didn't believe it herself, but she was doing her best to sell the plan. And I thought she was very eloquent.
Yeah.
But the thing that jumped out at me was when it got raucous, because parliamentarians everywhere in our Western democratic societies are known to get a little loud at times in their respective legislative chambers. But the Speaker of the House was having none of it. As soon as they got too loud, he'd stand up and he would shut them down. And he'd say, that's enough. The Prime Minister deserves to be heard.
John Bercow is a character. He's the Speaker of the House of Commons in England, in the United Kingdom, I should say. And he's a character. He is a great champion of the House of Commons.
Well, when you compare that...
Yeah, if any people are interested in this, I urge them to go to YouTube and look up at some of the clips of his handling of debates in the House of Commons.
Because,
it's, again, extraordinary stuff.
Because when you compare him to our Speaker of the House, he'll stand up. The Speaker of the House will stand up because it's getting rowdy, and
You're not referring to the former Speaker of the House, I assume.
Either one.
And Andy Scheer?
Andy and his chairmate, the guy who took over, and whose name I cannot remember at the moment, but we haven't had. Maybe I'm being harsh, but I don't remember a Speaker of the House that comes anywhere near to the one in Britain. But what would happen was the Speaker would stand up, and say, "Now, settle down," and I know if I were the Speaker of the House, which I'll never be, but if I was, listen. That's enough. And I would point to the offender and name him or her and say, that's enough. We don't need this kind of nonsense in the chamber. And that's warning 1. Warning 2, that's enough. Third time, Sergeant of Arms, remove that individual. They are not allowed back in these chambers until they're willing to sit quietly after they apologize to the House for interrupting.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, I think that the House of Commons in the United Kingdom is much more ruckus, if you will, rough and tumble than they are here, and I, that sometimes because there are so many people in the House of Commons.
Well, there's 650 MPs over there,
right? I mean, and the interesting thing is then that when they constructed the chamber, when they rebuilt the chamber after the Second World War, they kept it the original size. Which can't accommodate all of the members of Parliament.
Right.
So when the House is full in the United Kingdom, it's standing room only. So you'll see that MPs will have to be crowded in around the doors just to get in because there aren't enough seats for them. And there aren't individual seats, there are benches in the House of Commons, unlike here where every MP gets his or her own seat.
They get a whole desk. Anyway,
and a desk. Yeah, no desks in Great Britain.
No, they don't even have room for swords anymore.
Right, that's true enough. But it's quite fascinating stuff, and this is the House of Commons in Great Britain, in the United Kingdom, is the mother of parliaments. It's now close to 1,000 years old, and it is the place. It's the place where democracy and political democracy, as we know it, was born,
right,
and evolved. And so many of the things, as we've talked about, Nick, important traditions come from historical events that occurred.
We're going to have to do a separate podcast just on that, just on the traditions around the slamming of the doors not in the Regent's face, but in the
Black Rod. We call them Black Rod, or her Black Rod, because they carry a black rod.
Right. And there's a whole tradition around that. Why the British House of Commons is designed the way it is, and the two-sword length, all that stuff, where all that comes from. We could probably spend 2 hours just discussing those different, for those who are interested.
Yeah,
but
it's a fascinating topic. Topic.
Certainly for a lot of us it is.
If you're a student of democratic procedures, I really urge people to take the time to follow up and follow what's been going on around this Brexit thing, because regardless of where you would be on this issue, and obviously we don't have a dog in the hunt, okay, so it's not that big a deal for us one way or the other. Although, in fairness, if the United Kingdom does ultimately leave the EU, which it appears it will, one way or the other, with or without an orderly deal, what it does is it opens up the possibility that we can have a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom and bypass the whole EU structure. So there's economic opportunity for us here in Canada as a result of this. So, apart from the fact that I hate what the European Union, I don't live there, but I could see what it's become. And it's very much an anti-democratic force in many ways.
Oh, it's been a disaster from the word go.
And I think it's going to get worse, and for a number of reasons. But we're setting aside all of the pros and cons of the issues. If you're a student of the democratic process, it's really a fascinating thing, and I urge people to follow it, because there's so much that you can learn from this, and by example, there's so much that we as Canadians can learn to appreciate from how they've managed to conduct themselves in such a controversial subject in the mother of all parliaments, the United Kingdom.
I want to take the last few minutes of the show, because this we've got to do.
Do we really?
Yes,
stupid
this bit.
People
doing really stupid things. Mention that. Okay, now just when you thought it could get stupider. The question I had today was, how stupid can stupid get? Well, there's a guy by the name of, it's right here, Ed Case. He's a Democratic congressman for the state of Hawaii. And it's a majority Asian, Hawaii, of course, right? Polynesian, Hawaii, Asian.
Well, not necessarily. It's not.
Well, that's the majority of his riding.
Okay, yeah, in his district it is.
District is a better word, yes. Right. Okay, so he is a white Anglo-Saxon, and you look at his picture, and sure enough, this guy is as white as snow. There's nothing Asian. There's nothing Polynesian. There's nothing, about him. He looks like he came from Scotland. That's how white this guy is. Give him red hair, and you'd swear he was a Scot. Anyway, but he comes out at a function, an event celebrating the Asian American and Pacific Islanders member. He's at this function, and a bunch of his constituents are there, and he says to the crowd, "I'm an Asian trapped in a white body." Now, that went over like a lead balloon, because anybody who looks at him knows it's nonsense. This is stupider than the white woman back in the continental United States who said, "I identify as a black woman," and had on really dark makeup and had her hair, in a particular style that a lot of Afro-Americans like. And
right,
or
Elizabeth Warren, right?
I think that's who it was.
No. Elizabeth Warren is the I'm part Native.
Oh yes, and there, yeah. She
Part Navajo, I think she's part Navajo. I think it was like I'm 1/8 of 1% Navajo.
Yeah, you realize we all fit that bill.
We're all oppressed.
Yeah, you
down with white privilege.
Yeah. Anyway, so he comes out and he says this. Now this goes over like a balloon.
Because this guy doesn't solve. This guy is not suffering. This guy has not been the beneficiary of white privilege. Clearly.
Oh, apparently not.
Because he's not really white.
No, apparently, of course. How else?
He only appears to be white.
How else could he say I'm a victim of white privilege if he's white?
Well, no. This is the point. He's not white. But he is white. But he's trapped.
Yep.
He's admitting that he has a white body.
Well,
he's really an Asian trapped in his white body.
Here's an interesting paragraph. The comments, unsurprisingly, did not go over well with many in the Asian American community, drawing comparisons to actors who have whitewashed Asian characters. Isn't that right, David Carradine? Now, for those of you who don't get the reference, if you remember the old series Kung Fu.
Right.
David Carradine was a 6'5" Asian walking around the southwestern United States trying to be peaceful and ending up in bar fights all the time. And that role was originally written by, not Jackie Chan, the other one. Come on, I meant Bruce Lee.
Right.
For himself. Bruce Lee was 5 foot, an inch or two.
Right. And David Carradine, by the way, just to clarify, he actually wasn't Asian.
No, he was white.
You said it, but he played an Asian.
Yeah. So right. this
sort of like Marcus Welby. What Robert Young.
But
I'm not a doctor, but I do play one.
Play one on TV. Of all the dumb commercials. Anyway,
I'm not Chinese, but I do play
one on TV. But this is the kind of thing that it's a slap in the face. And these people got, how insulting that was. He didn't. And he's standing there going, that would be like me saying, look, I'm just a Martian trapped in a human body. No, sorry, you're not. You never have been. The denial. There's a line. You ever watch the series, the two guys working together, MythBusters, and they had a line. The short guy did, not the big burly guy, but the other guy. He had a line that would go. He would say something like, "I reject reality and institute my own." Well, that's what this guy's doing. He's rejecting reality and putting in place his own version of it. And the problem with that is that's called fantasy. And these guys, I couldn't believe my ears or my eyes when I think it was you that led me to this story. But just some of the quotes in here. I wonder if Tidal or Scarlett will play the Asian trapped in Ed Case's body.
Okay.
But just plain stupid.
And that's why we have this segment.
Stupid. All right. Well, that leaves us with about 2 minutes left.
No. Yes. A minute and a half.
A minute and a half. Okay. I'm going to take the last minute. I'm going to promote something that's coming up. The Canadian Film Festival. There was a documentary. For those of you who don't know, my wife has an organization called the Warhorse Project, and she runs the Warhorse Project is part of an organization called Hope Reigns, and it's a equine assisted therapy program for veterans and first responders. There was a documentary made a couple of years ago by some journalism students out of Algonquin College who went and made a documentary about what she's did. It's a 15-minute long documentary called Secret War. That's coming up. They're going to re-show that Saturday, February the 2nd, 2019, no kidding, at 6 p.m. If you want, it's going to be at Saw Video Not Project Space. Did I say that right? Saw Videos Not KNOT Project Space, 2 Daly Avenue, Ottawa. So let's just cut most of that out and say it's going to be at 2 Daly Avenue, Ottawa, at 6 p.m. this coming Saturday, February the 2nd. I highly recommend, if you're in that area at all and you care about this topic, go and see it. It's a brilliantly made documentary, and I'm setting my bias aside. I'm really trying hard to do that because this is a very worthwhile program, and it benefits a lot of people.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick, for that ad, and I completely concur and encourage people to attend if they're in the Ottawa area. So that's it for tonight, guys. It's been a blast. We'll catch you next week. Same back time, same back URL.
Yeah, we can't say channel. Yeah, well, no, we can't say channel anymore.